The old family house looked the same from the street, but it felt heavier the moment I stepped inside. The brass handle was cold, the hallway smelled like lemon polish, and the wooden floor creaked as if it was warning me to be careful. Voices drifted from the dining room, too bright and too loud for a serious meeting. I kept my coat on, already wishing the door was behind me again. The dining table was cleared like a courtroom. My dad, Robert, sat at the head with his reading glasses, and my mom, Elena, smoothed the tablecloth again and again. Aunt Diane whispered to Uncle Peter, and my cousin Chloe stared at her phone while pretending she wasn't listening. A man named Harold held a thick folder against his chest. My brother Marcus stood near the window, smiling like he already owned the room. When Dad said we were here to settle the family inheritance, the air changed. Everyone leaned in, eyes sharp, waiting to hear who would get the 8 rental houses. Marcus cleared his throat and announced our parents were signing all of them to him. The room erupted in cheers, like he'd won a prize. I stayed quiet, then looked at my dad and calmly asked one simple question about Grandpa William's will, one word, legal, that made the cheering stop. The moment I said the word legal, it felt like someone had shut all the windows in the house at once. The cheers didn't just fade, they stopped too fast, like a song cut off in the middle. People looked at my dad, then at Marcus, then back at me, trying to decide if I was being rude or if I had a reason. Aunt Diane's smile hung on her face like it didn't know where to go. Harold tightened his grip on the folder, and my mom's hand froze on the tablecloth as if the fabric had suddenly burned her fingers. Marcus tried to laugh it off. He gave that quick, confident smile he always used when he wanted the room on his side. "Come on," he said, waving one hand like my question was a fly. "We all know what Grandpa wanted. He wanted the family rentals kept together. Dad and Mom are doing the right thing." He spoke like he was already the owner, like the keys were already in his pocket. And for a second, some people wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than thinking something complicated might be true. But my dad didn't answer right away. He blinked behind his glasses, and the pause was just long enough for the room to feel the crack in the story. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. My dad is usually careful with words. He builds his sentences like fences, straight, neat, designed to keep certain things out. That silence told me he was measuring how much truth he could afford to say without losing control of the room. My mom finally spoke, softly, like she was trying to smooth the air the way she smoothed the cloth. "This meeting isn't the place for old details," she said. Her voice sounded kind, but I knew it was a warning. She meant, don't embarrass us. Don't make this messy. And yet the messy part had already been there for years. It was only hidden, like dust under a rug. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point at anyone. I just looked at my dad and repeated myself in a simpler way. "Dad," I said, "Grandpa William wrote rules. He used words like legal descendant. Are we following those words, or are we just doing what people expect?" I kept my tone calm, but my stomach was tight. Calm isn't the same as fearless. Calm is sometimes just a decision to not give the room your panic. Aunt Diane huffed. "Legal descendant? What does that even mean?" she asked, loud enough to pull attention back to her. "Marcus is your brother. He grew up in this house. That's all anyone needs to know." A few heads nodded, because people love simple stories. They love neat labels. They love the kind of truth that fits in one sentence. Harold cleared his throat, careful and polite. "It can matter," he said. "In some documents, the exact legal relationship affects the transfer of property, especially if older wills have conditions." He said it gently, like he was placing glass on a table and praying nobody would knock it over. Marcus's smile tightened again. His eyes flicked to my Uncle Peter, just for a second, but I caught it. That quick look was the kind of look people give when they are checking if someone else will keep a secret. Uncle Peter didn't look back. He stared down at his hands, and the skin around his knuckles looked too pale, like all the blood had drained away. That look is what pushed me. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just that simple fact. Marcus knew something. Uncle Peter knew something. And I was tired of being the only one in the room treated like I didn't matter. I leaned forward slightly, still speaking as if I was just asking for a missing detail. "Dad," I said, "did Grandpa William ever adopt Marcus? Yes or no?" The question landed harder than I expected. It wasn't even a long question, but it carried years inside it. It carried those old papers, those quiet hints, those moments I had brushed off as nothing because I didn't want to be the person who questions family stories. My mom's face changed first. It was quick, Just a flicker, but it was enough. She looked at my dad the way someone looks at a door they hoped would stay locked. My dad didn't answer. Aunt Diane frowned. Cousin Chloe stopped scrolling and finally held still, her phone forgotten. Even the cookies on the side table seemed too sweet for the room now. Marcus stood straighter, like he could hold the truth back by posture alone. "This is nonsense," he said. "You're trying to twist things because you're bitter." His voice was louder now, sharper. "But I noticed something. He didn't say no. He didn't say, Grandpa didn't adopt me. He just attacked my reason for asking." I took a slow breath. "I'm not bitter," I said. "I'm asking because I saw paperwork years ago. And because if Grandpa's will was written a certain way, then it matters." My hands stayed folded, but my heart wasn't calm at all. It beat like it was trying to warn my ribs that the room might explode. The truth is, I didn't find out from gossip or a dramatic confession. I found out the way many real secrets are found, by accident, in a quiet room, when nobody thinks you're paying attention. Years back, Grandpa William had asked me to help sort his study. His study had shelves packed with old files, little labeled boxes, and envelopes with stiff corners. The house was quiet that day, and dust floated in the light like tiny ghosts. Grandpa moved slower than he used to, but his mind was sharp enough to cut. At one point, I pulled out a folder that didn't match the others. It wasn't labeled like the rest. It had a plain cover, and inside were papers that looked official. I saw a name, Marcus's name, printed in a formal way. I saw signatures. And I saw words that made my mouth go dry: adoption, petition, approved. Before I could ask, Grandpa took the folder from my hands so fast it startled me. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He simply looked at me and said, very quietly, "Some things protect people. And some things ruin people. Don't go digging unless you're ready for both." I didn't dig then. I was younger, and I wanted peace more than answers. I told myself it didn't matter. Marcus was Marcus. My family was my family. Paper couldn't change birthdays and dinners and years of living under the same roof. That's what I told myself, because it was easier than thinking my family had built part of its love on a secret. But later, after Grandpa William passed, things shifted. People began talking about money more openly. They began saying numbers out loud without shame. I heard Aunt Diane mention rent totals like she was reciting poetry. I heard Marcus speak about future income with a smile that felt greedy. Harold's office began sending letters. The family started using careful phrases like assets and transfer and ownership. And when money comes into a room, secrets don't stay quiet. Money shakes them loose. That was when I saw it again, not in Grandpa's hands this time, but in estate paperwork that someone had carelessly left open. Marcus's name appeared alongside a legal note that didn't fit the story I'd always been told. It showed a link, not to my parents as everyone assumed, but to Uncle Peter. Not as a casual mention. As a legal connection. As if the family tree had been quietly redrawn. So when Marcus stood up today and announced he was getting all 8 rental properties, when the room cheered like I was invisible, I realized something sharp and simple. The secret wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a tool. A weapon. It was being used to push me out while pretending the rules didn't matter. Harold's folder sat on the table like a silent judge. I imagined the rental houses, not as warm homes, but as numbers on paper. $3,000 a month here, $2,400 there, adding up into a stream that could become a life. 8 rentals could turn into $20,000 a month, depending on leases and repairs. That kind of money doesn't just pay bills. It buys power. It buys loyalty. It buys applause in a room full of relatives. I looked at Marcus and saw what the cheers had done to him. They had made him stand taller, like a king. And I saw what they had done to me, too. They had tried to turn me into a shadow. But shadows only exist when someone blocks the light, and I was done letting them do that. So I kept my voice even and asked the question again, but this time I aimed it like an arrow at the center of the room. "Dad," I said, "if Grandpa William legally adopted Marcus, and if Uncle Peter is his legal father on paper, then how can Marcus be counted the same way under Grandpa's will and under your transfer documents? Are we sure the paperwork matches the story everyone is cheering for?" Nobody answered right away. The silence grew heavy enough to feel like a second table placed on top of the first. And in that thick, trapped quiet, I saw the celebration turning into something else. Confusion first, then fear, then the beginning of chaos. The silence didn't last long, because my family has never been good at sitting with discomfort.
The first sound was Aunt Diane's sharp breath, like she had bitten into something sour.
Then came the scraping of chairs, the shifting of bodies, and that low, spreading buzz of people whispering at the same time. It was like the room had turned into a beehive, and my one question had poked the center. Faces turned toward my dad as if he could simply smile and make the problem disappear. My dad finally lifted his hands, palms out, trying to calm everyone the way he used to calm arguments when we were kids. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said. His voice had the sound of authority, but it was thinner than usual. "This is a family matter, and it's being handled properly." He glanced at Harold, and it was the kind of glance that asked for rescue without words. Harold adjusted his tie and spoke carefully, like every sentence came with a legal price tag. "Mr. Robert," he said, "if there's any question about adoption records or legal parentage, it's best to pause the transfer until it's confirmed. That protects everyone." He didn't say it, but we all heard the rest. If you keep signing and it's wrong, someone can sue. Marcus's face turned hard. "This is insane," he snapped. He pointed at me like he was accusing me of stealing. "You're trying to ruin my future because you can't handle not being first." His voice was loud enough to fill the corners of the room. People flinched, not because they disagreed, but because anger makes people uncomfortable when it's too honest. I didn't match his volume. I stayed steady. "Marcus," I said, "I'm not asking for first. I'm asking for fair. And I'm asking for the truth." I turned back to Harold. "If the will has conditions, can the properties even be signed over like this without checking?" Harold nodded once, slow and firm. "If the grandfather's will limits distribution to specific legal descendants, and if those conditions still apply to these assets, then yes, this needs review." He opened his folder and slid a page forward just slightly, not fully showing it to the room, but enough to signal that this wasn't just family drama. This was paper. This was law. Aunt Diane leaned in. "Are you saying the transfer can't happen?" she demanded. Her voice had that rude edge of someone who feels entitled to the outcome. "They can give the properties to whoever they want. They are the parents." Harold didn't flinch. "Parents can transfer their own property," he said, "but if the properties came through an estate with restrictions, the method and timing matter. Also, if there is shared ownership, liens, or trust language, those details matter." He said matter like it was a brick. Each time he said it, another wall went up between the cheering crowd and the outcome they wanted. Uncle Peter finally spoke, and his voice was too quiet for how big the moment was. "We don't need to make this ugly," he said. His eyes stayed low. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at the table, like it might swallow him if he stared long enough. That was the moment I understood something important. Uncle Peter wasn't just nervous about paperwork. He was afraid of being seen. Afraid of being named. Afraid of what the family would say once they realized the golden child story had been built on a secret nobody had agreed to share. My cousin Chloe whispered, "What is she talking about?" And her friend whispered back, "Adoption." That single word slid through the room like spilled ink, staining every conversation it touched. Marcus snapped his head toward Uncle Peter. "Say something," he said, sharp, almost begging. "Tell them this is nothing." Uncle Peter's lips parted, then closed. He looked at my dad, and my dad looked away. That tiny exchange told me more than any confession could. My father knew. My mother knew. They had all known for years, and they had decided silence was easier than honesty. My mom stood up so fast her chair knocked against the table. "Enough," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm in a way that made everyone pause. "This meeting is about property, not family history." She looked at me with eyes that begged and warned at the same time. "Please don't do this here." But here was exactly the problem. Here was the family house. Here was where secrets were made. Here was where people learned how to smile while swallowing resentment. If not here, then where? In private, where they could dismiss me quietly. In a hallway, where my words could be twisted into gossip. I was done letting my truth be handled like something shameful. "I didn't start this," I said. I kept my voice calm, but every word was clear. "You started it when you decided I deserved nothing." The room reacted to that sentence like it had teeth. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at the papers. Some stared at Marcus, as if suddenly noticing how naturally he took applause. Aunt Diane scoffed, but even she didn't cheer anymore. Harold spoke again. "Before anyone signs, I recommend we confirm the chain of ownership. Where each property came from, whether it was purchased directly by the parents or inherited from Mr. Williams' estate, and whether any trust or will conditions apply. He flipped to another page, and the sound of paper turning was oddly loud in the quiet room.
My dad rubbed his forehead.
"Harold," he said, voice strained, "we can clear this up later. Today is supposed to be simple." Harold didn't smile. "Simple is what people want," he said. "Legal is what people need."
That sentence hit Marcus like a slap. His eyes narrowed.
"So you're taking her side," he barked at Harold. Harold lifted a hand slightly, calm.
"I'm taking the document's side," he said. "I don't take sides.
I prevent disasters."
My Aunt Diane leaned toward my dad. "Rub it, don't let her control this," she hissed. "She's always been dramatic.
Always looking for attention."
It would have been easy to explode then. To defend myself with a list of every time I'd been ignored. Every birthday gift Marcus got that I didn't. Every time the family called him the responsible one while treating me like an afterthought. But if I had done that, they would have labeled me the emotional one. The jealous one. The unreliable narrator. They would have used my anger as proof I was wrong. So I stayed steady and let the facts speak. "I'm not asking for attention," I said. "I'm asking for a pause. That's all. A pause until we know what Grandpa Williams will actually says about who can receive what." My dad's eyes widened slightly, like he didn't expect me to say pause instead of take everything. He had built his plan around the idea that I would either accept my loss quietly or throw a fit loudly. He had not planned for me to be calm and specific. Marcus scoffed. "It doesn't matter what Grandpa wrote," he said. "Mom and Dad own these properties now. They can give them to me. I've worked for it. I've managed repairs. I've dealt with tenants. I've earned it." That made a few people nod. Because earned is a word people love. It makes money sound like a medal. It makes favoritism sound like fairness. I didn't deny Marcus had worked. I didn't deny he'd made calls, fixed leaks, argued with renters who were late on payments. But I also knew something else. I had helped too. Quietly. Without applause. I had been the one who wrote polite letters to tenants when Marcus was too angry. I had been the one who sat with my mom at night when she cried about bills. I had been part of this family's survival, even if no one clapped for it. "Work matters," I said. "But paperwork matters too. And the will matters if these assets came through Grandpa William." Harold nodded again. "Exactly," he said. "Even if the parents now hold title, a prior estate agreement could set expectations or create claims. Also, if any beneficiaries were bypassed, it can create grounds for challenge." He chose his words carefully, but challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud. That was when my cousin Chloe finally spoke out loud, not whispering. "Wait," she said, eyes wide. "Are you saying Marcus isn't, actually, your brother?" A low gasp moved through the room. Aunt Diane snapped, "Don't be ridiculous," but her voice trembled. People don't tremble when they are sure. Marcus's face went bright with anger. "I am her brother," he shouted. "I grew up with her. I lived in this house. This is my family." And that was the strangest part. He was both right and not right at the same time. Love and paper don't always match. Life and law don't always agree. But when money is involved, law steps forward like a guard at a gate. "I'm not saying you didn't grow up here," I told him. "I'm saying the legal truth is different from the story everyone tells at dinner." My Uncle Peter finally looked up, and his eyes were wet. His mouth opened, and for a moment I thought he might confess everything. But then he swallowed it back down, like he had practiced swallowing this truth for years. My mom's voice cracked. "Please," she said again, softer now, almost like she was talking to herself. "Please don't tear the family apart." I looked at her and felt a sharp sadness, because she wasn't wrong. This could tear the family. But the family had already been tearing, just in slow motion, quietly, with me on the side nobody bothered to stitch back together. "I'm not tearing it apart," I said. "I'm refusing to be the piece you throw away to keep it looking neat." Harold closed the folder with a firm, final sound. "No signatures today," he said. "Not until we verify the adoption status, the will conditions, and the chain of title for all 8 properties." He looked at my dad. "That's my professional advice." My dad stared at the papers like they had betrayed him. Marcus stared at me like I had betrayed him. And the relatives, those same relatives who had cheered minutes ago, now looked unsure, shifting from celebration to suspicion, from loyalty to fear. The meeting didn't end with a toast.
It ended with people standing too quickly, chairs scraping, voices rising. Aunt Diane stormed into the hallway to make a phone call. Cousin Chloe whispered to someone that she knew something was off. My Uncle Peter disappeared into the kitchen like he needed air. My mom sat back down slowly, hands trembling, and my dad remained frozen, staring at the pen that hadn't touched the paper.
And me?
I stayed seated for one more moment, listening to the chaos I had triggered, feeling my heart beat hard but steady. Because the celebration hadn't turned into chaos by accident. It turned into chaos the moment the family realized the truth was heavier than applause, and that the story they had loved was not the whole story. When the meeting finally broke apart, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a storm scattering people in different directions, each of them grabbing whatever piece of the story they wanted to carry. The old family house, which had been so loud a minute ago, became a maze of sharp whispers and slammed drawers. I heard Aunt Diane's heels clicking down the hallway like a threat. I heard the kitchen faucet run, as if someone needed the sound of water to drown out the truth. Somewhere in the living room, Cousin Chloe was telling someone, "I swear I didn't know," as if ignorance could wash her hands clean. I stayed near the dining room doorway, watching my dad and Harold speak over the folder like it was a bomb. My mom sat at the table with her hands folded, staring at the tablecloth the way people stare at a hospital wall while waiting for news. Marcus paced by the window, his jaw tight, his fingers opening and closing as if he wanted to grab something he could control. Every few steps he glanced at me with eyes that said, "You did this."
And maybe I had.
But I also knew he had done something too. He had stood up and announced my life was worth nothing, and he had expected me to smile through it. Harold's voice stayed calm. "Even now. I'll need copies of the adoption records," he said. "And we should pull the original will, not a summary. We should also check how each property was titled. Some may be separate, some may have conditions."
My dad nodded like a man being pushed backward.
"Fine," he said, but his voice sounded tired and small. "We'll get whatever you need." Aunt Diane appeared in the doorway again, phone in hand, eyes blazing.
"Robert, don't let her threaten you," she said. "She's bluffing."
"She won't do anything." I met her gaze and didn't blink. "I'm not bluffing," I said, quietly but clearly. Aunt Diane's lips pressed into a line, and she turned away like she couldn't stand looking at me if I wasn't shrinking.
I used to shrink around her.
I used to smile politely while she compared me to Marcus in that sweet, poisonous way. "Marcus is so steady. Marcus is so smart. Marcus really understands money."
Today, I didn't shrink.
Today, I let my words take up space. Marcus followed me into the hallway when I finally stepped away from the dining room.
He moved fast, like he was afraid I might vanish before he could corner me.
The hall was narrow, lined with old photos, birthday cakes, graduation caps, family trips, all of us smiling in frames that didn't tell the truth underneath. Marcus stopped near a picture where we were both children, standing shoulder to shoulder. It was almost funny, in a bitter way, that we looked so innocent there. "You planned this," he said, voice low and sharp. "You waited for the biggest moment to embarrass me."
I let out a slow breath. "I didn't plan to embarrass you," I said.
"I planned to protect myself."
His eyes flashed.
"Protect yourself? From what?"
"From me getting what I earned."
"You didn't earn everything," I said. My words stayed simple, but each one was solid. "You earned respect for the work you did. You didn't earn the right to erase me." Marcus scoffed, but his voice wavered. "You're acting like they hate you." "I'm acting like they treated me like I don't matter," I said. "And today, they proved it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "You're going to ruin the family," he said.
That sentence used to scare me. It used to make me back down.
Because in this house, family was always held above everything. Above fairness, above honesty, above the feelings of the person who didn't fit.
But now that word felt different. It felt like a chain.
"I'm not ruining the family," I told him.
"I'm ruining the lie."
Marcus's face tightened, and for a second he looked less like a golden child and more like a frightened person. "You don't understand," he said, and his voice sounded raw, like he was scraping the words out of his throat. "If this comes out, people will look at me like I'm not real." I didn't answer right away, because I understood more than he thought. I understood that Marcus's whole life had been built on everyone agreeing to one version of the story. And that story had given him love, praise, and a place at the top.
But it had also trapped him.
If the story changed, he might feel like he changed too. "You are real,"
I said finally. But the papers are real too. And you used the story to hurt me. He opened his mouth to argue, but then footsteps sounded behind us. My dad came into the hallway, his face tight, his eyes tired. He looked at Marcus, then at me, as if seeing us both for the first time in a long time. Come into the study, my dad said to me. The study was the quietest room in the house, and it always had been. It smelled like old books and ink, and the curtains kept the light soft and dim. My dad closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, like he needed the wood to hold him upright. Then he walked to the desk, pulled out a chair, and sat down slowly. He didn't start with anger. He started with a tired kind of honesty that looked like defeat. You know, he said, voice low, I never wanted you to find out like this. I sat across from him, hands folded, still calm on the outside. But you wanted me to find out, I said. Just not today. Not when it would cost you something. He flinched, and I knew the truth hit him because it was true. My mom came in quietly and stood near the bookshelf. She looked like she had aged 5 years in one afternoon. We were trying to keep the peace, she whispered. Peace for who? I asked, and my voice was gentle but firm. For me, or for everyone else? My dad rubbed his face with both hands, then dropped them to the desk. Your grandpa adopted Marcus, he admitted. The words fell heavy, as if he hated how real they sounded out loud. It was complicated. Your Uncle Peter had problems. He made mistakes. Your grandpa thought the adoption would protect the child. And did it? I asked. My dad's eyes flickered. In some ways, he said. Marcus had stability. A good name. A home. But it also made him legally tied somewhere else, I said. And you knew that? My mom's lips trembled. We thought it wouldn't matter, she said again, and this time she sounded like she was begging the world to agree with her. I leaned forward slightly. It matters now because you made it matter, I said. You were willing to ignore the legal truth to give Marcus everything. And you expected me to accept nothing. My dad's shoulders sagged. We didn't expect nothing, he said weakly. We thought you'd be okay. You're independent. That word, independent, made my stomach twist. Families often use it as a compliment, but in my house it was a way of saying, you don't need as much love. You don't need as much help. You don't need as much money. It was a label that excused neglect. I'm independent because I had to be, I said. Not because I wanted to be. My mom wiped her eyes quickly, like she didn't want her tears to count as guilt. What do you want? She asked. The question was simple, and that's why it mattered. Because it was the first time anyone in this process had asked what I wanted instead of deciding it for me. I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't ask to take Marcus's life away. I didn't ask for the family to shame him. I asked for fairness and clarity, things that should never have been treated like threats. I want the property handled the right way, I said. I want the will respected. I want the legal facts faced, not hidden. And I want a fair share, something that recognizes I'm your child too. My dad stared at the desk for a long time. He looked like a man who had built a plan out of old habits and favoritism and hoped nobody would challenge it. Now the plan was crumbling, and he didn't know what to rebuild it with. We can negotiate, he said finally. We can find a solution without tearing everything open. I shook my head. It's already open, I said. You just didn't want to look. There was a knock at the study door, and Harold stepped in, careful and respectful. Mr. Robert, he said, I've made notes. I'll need the will, the adoption records, and the property deeds. We should also discuss whether a trust should be formed or whether the assets should be divided cleanly. He glanced at me briefly, not judging, just acknowledging that I was part of the equation now. My dad nodded slowly. All right, he said. Harold left, and the room fell quiet again. My mom spoke in a small voice. This will change how people see us, she said. I looked at her and felt something sad but clear. Maybe they should, I said. Because the way people see us now is based on a story that was never honest. When we left the study, the house was still full of broken energy. Relatives were gathering coats and whispering near the front door. Aunt Diane glared at me like I had committed a crime. Uncle Peter kept his eyes down, moving through the room like a ghost. Marcus stood near the staircase, arms crossed, his face unreadable, part anger, part fear, part something like grief. As I walked past him, he spoke quietly, so only I could hear. If they split it,
You won't be happy, he said. You'll still hate me.
I paused and looked at him.
I don't hate you, I said. I hate what you did today.
He didn't answer.
I stepped outside into the cold air, and the sky looked wide and clean after the tight walls of the house. My breath came out in a pale cloud, and for the first time all day, I felt my shoulders loosen. The truth was out now, at least enough that it couldn't be shoved back into a drawer.
The cheering was gone. The easy story was gone.
The family's neat picture had a crack running through it.
But I also felt something else, something I didn't expect.
Relief. Because I had finally said, in the simplest way possible, that I wasn't willing to be erased. And no matter what happened next, whether the rentals were divided, whether the will caused a legal fight, whether Aunt Diane stayed angry for years, I knew one thing for sure. That calm question had changed the balance of the room.
And I had changed with it.